the unwelcome present. The tragic death of Prince Dara Shikoh of the Mughal Empire by Niccolò Manucci. Before issuing the sentence of death against Prince Dara Shikoh, his younger brother Aurangzeb asked him if fortune had been as favorable to him as it had been adverse, and he had held him, Aurangzeb, a prisoner, what would he have done? Knowing that in no way, whatever, would Aurangzeb spare his life, and that the question was meant as mere scoffing, Dara replied boldly and resolutely, like a prince and high-hearted leader, that if such had been the case, the four principal gates of Delhi would have yielded the answer to his question, where would have been exposed the four quarters of his body. This answer was conveyed to Aurangzeb, who, furious at such contumacy and license of speech, sent out his sentence of death against the prince, his eldest brother. When he asked who would be so bold as to behead him, the cruel Chela, Nazar Beg, offered himself to do this barbarous harshness and exceedingly hazardous execution. Nazar Beg was one of King Shah Jahan's slaves, brought up by him from childhood. When Aurangzeb made his father a prisoner, all the slaves submitted to him. Nazar Beg had not forgotten how once Dara Shikoh had abused him for some careless insolence, and to get his revenge offered himself gladly. He took with him the official next in rank to him, one Makbula, and 6 other men of the same persuasion. These all set out from the court. After this, to mislead the populace, Aurangzeb ordered out Sefe Khan at the head of 4,000 horsemen and some camels laden with kitchen utensils and the other necessaries for a journey, it being announced that he was about to escort Dara Shikoh to the fortress of Gwalior. Those executioners of tyranny and barbarity arrived at the garden of Khigrabad at 7 o'clock at night. They entered the room where the afflicted prince was walking up and down. They laid hands upon him, and showing neither compassion nor respect, flung him to the ground and cut off his head. Leaving the body to welter in its blood, they carried the head with all haste to Aurangzeb's presence. It was then 8 o'clock at night, and he was in the garden of the palace. Such was the tragic and lamentable fate meted out to the unhappy Prince Dara, firstborn and heir to the Mughal Empire, loved and cherished by his father, Shah Jahan, and respected by the people. Neither his good qualities nor his rank sufficed to deliver him from the evil designs of Aurangzeb. When Aurangzeb learnt that the head of Dara had arrived, he ordered it to be brought to him in the garden on a dish, with the face cleaned of the blood on the surface and a turban on the head. He called for lights to be brought so that he might see the mark borne by the prince on his forehead, and might make sure that it was the head of Dara, and not that of another person. After he had satisfied himself, he told them to put it on the ground and gave it 3 thrusts in the face with the sword he carried by way of staff, saying, "Behold the face of a would-be king and emperor of all the Mughal realms. Take him out of my sai." He gave secret orders to place it in a box, to be sent by runners to the eunuch Akbar Khan, who had charged Shah Jahan's prison, with orders to deliver it to him when the aging emperor was seated at table. It was to be offered in his name as a present. This was planned by Aurangzeb with great glee, to avenge himself for the love lavished on Dara Shikoh and the little account made of himself. It was as if he said, "Now has your love come to an end. He that was despised is lord of the empire, and the favourite gone down into death." After the head had been sent off, Aurangzeb ordered the interment of Prince Dara's body in the sepulchre of the Emperor Humayun. On that night Roshan Ara Begum gave a great feast. On receipt of Aurangzeb's orders, Akbar Khan, to comply with them, waited until the hour when Shah Jahan had sat down to dinner. When he had begun to eat, Akbar Khan entered with the box and laid it before the unhappy father, saying, "King Aurangzeb, your son, sends this gift to your majesty, to let him see that he does not forget him." The old emperor said, "Blessed be Allah that my son still remembers me." The box having been placed upon the table, he ordered it with great eagerness to be opened. Suddenly, on withdrawing the lid, he discovered the face of Prince Dara. Horrified, he uttered one cry and fell on his hands and face upon the table, and striking against the golden vessels, broke some of his teeth and lay there apparently lifeless. Princess Jahanara and the other women present began to wail, beat their breasts, tear their hair, break their ornaments, and rend their garments. Then Akbar Khan removed the head. When Shah Jahan recovered consciousness, he began to pluck out his beard till it was all bleeding, and to beat his face, then dissolving into a flood of tears. At this time there came in various women and carried off Princess Jahanara, who had fainted and collapsed. They also removed the aged emperor. I leave out any consideration of the affliction of the father, who loved Dara so tenderly, and of Princess Jahanara, who thus saw the lifeless head of the brother she doted upon. For I profess only to write of outward events, and not to explain inner feelings. In the reign of Shah Jahan, Dara Shikoh, and the Mystic Five. Exploring the secret of the inner sound current. Sultan-ul-Azkar. Just listen. Dara Shikoh, 1615 to 1659, the eldest son of Emperor Shah Jahan, was a remarkable figure in the history of Sufism in India. He was on intimate terms with such luminaries as Sarmad, Mullah Shah, Mian Mir, Guru Har Rai, and his own sister, the famed Princess Jahanara Begum. Although Dara's life was tragically cut short at the hands of his younger brother, Aurangzeb, over a succession dispute, his spiritual and historical writings continue to fascinate and have had a significant influence on the lives of Hindu, Sikh, and Islamic mystics. Prince Dara Shikoh, or Shikoh, as he is popularly known, straddled two worlds simultaneously, that of politics and that of religion. He was adept at the latter, but inadequate, or even naive, in the former. Despite being Shah Jahan's favoured son, to succeed him as the Mughal leader, Dara was more passionate and successful in his spiritual quest than he was in his military pursuits. Because of this, he was vulnerable to his brothers, who were more ambitious and treacherous in their pursuit of their father's throne. Yet today, the memory of Prince Dara Shikoh lives on, and his reputation shines ever brighter because of his deep devotion to the interior quest for God realization and for doing pioneering work in translating and publishing books that merged two oceans, Hinduism and Islam, and which sought a common and unifying core. I first became keenly interested in researching Dara Shikoh's life and work when I was commissioned by Cambridge University Press to write a short history of Shabd and Nada Yoga in India and its influence on new religions around the world. I was particularly struck by a passage in Dara Shikoh's book, The Compass of Truth, where he argued that listening to the inner sound was the greatest of all spiritual practices. Professor Scott Kugel's translation from the original Persian is revealing. There is no practice better than that of hearing this sound. This is because every other practice depends upon the will of the practitioner. If for a moment stops it, the practice ceases. But not so this practice. It does not depend upon the will of the practitioner. It is present and available without ceasing, and without interruption at all times. Dara's explication of Nada, or Shabd Yoga was, and still is, the best short summary of the practice I have ever come across. What is even more captivating is that Dara learned of this ancient technique from both Hindu yogis and his Sufi teachers, Mian Mir and Mullah Shah. As I dug deeper into the life and work of Dara Shikoh, I became intrigued by his cosmopolitan outlook on the mystical quest. Unlike his younger brother, Aurangzeb, who gravitated to a more fundamentalist and orthodox view of religion, Dara desired to see the unity of differing faiths, each that would underline and reinforce the revelations in the Quran. Among the many spiritual leaders Dara Shikoh encountered in his relatively short life, 4 stood out to me since they each focused on a threefold meditational technique. 1. Dhikr, remembrance, usually by intense repetitive prayer, like a Hindu mantra and the Christian Jesus prayer. 2. Contemplation of the inner light. And 3. Listening to the inner sound current. In addition, several of these mystics also enjoined breath control, known in yogic parlance as pranayama. The ancient meditative practice of listening to subtle inner sounds has a long history, dating back to the pre-Vedic period in India. However, it is only in the past 600 to 700 years in India that Shabd or Nada Yoga has become more widely known and adopted as a primary method for eliciting higher states of consciousness, with the stated goal of experiencing oneness with the transcendent being. The ancient Sanskrit text, Nadabindu Upanishad, provides salient details on how the practice is performed, setting up the basis for later iterations of the yogic technique. 31. The yogin being in the Siddhasana, posture, and practicing the Vaishnavi mudra should always hear the internal sound through the right ear. 32. The sound which he thus practices makes him deaf to all external sounds. Having overcome all obstacles, he enters the Turiya state within 15 days. 33. In the beginning of his practice, he hears many loud sounds. They gradually increase in pitch and are heard more and more subtly. 34. At first, the sounds are like those proceeding from the ocean, clouds, kettledrum and cataracts. In the middle stage, those proceeding from madala, a musical instrument, bell and horn. 35. At the last stage, those proceeding from tinkling bells, flute, veena, a musical instrument, and bees. Thus, he hears many such sounds more and more subtle. 36. When he comes to that stage when the sound of the great kettledrum is being heard, he should try to distinguish only sounds more and more subtle. 37. He may change his concentration from the gross sound to the subtle, or from the subtle to the gross, but he should not allow his mind to be diverted from them towards others. 38. The mind, having at first concentrated itself on any one sound, fixes firmly to that and is absorbed in it. 39. It, the mind, becoming insensible to the external impressions, becomes one with the sound as milk with water, and then becomes rapidly absorbed in chidakasa, the akasa, where chit prevails. 40. Being indifferent towards all objects, the yogin, having controlled his passions, should by continual practice concentrate his attention upon the sound which destroys the mind. 41. Having abandoned all thoughts and being freed from all actions, he should always concentrate his attention on the sound, and then his chitta becomes absorbed in it. Many centuries later, the famous 15th century text, Hatha Yoga Pradipika, explained what sounds are preliminary and which are more advanced. In the first stage, the sounds are surging, thundering like the beating of kettledrums and jingling ones. In the intermediate stage, they are like those produced by conch, mridanga, bells, etc. In the last stage, the sounds resemble those from tinklets, flute, veena, bee, etc. These various kinds of sounds are heard as being produced in the body. Though hearing loud sounds like those of thunder, kettledrums, etc., one should practice with the subtle sounds also, leaving the loudest, taking up the subtle one, and leaving the subtle one, taking up the loudest, thus practicing, the distracted mind does not wander elsewhere. Even Western-based religious traditions, particularly the Gnostic schools, have mentioned listening to a divine melody which lifts the soul up to higher regions. As Dr. Andrea Diem, professor of philosophy at Mount San Antonio College, elaborates, in the trimorphic protonoia, it is described in the following way: I am the Word who dwells in the ineffable silence. I dwell in undefiled light, and a thought revealed itself perceptibly through the great sound, and it, the sound, exists from the beginning in the foundations of the all. But there is a light that swells hidden in silence, and it was the first to come forth. I alone am the Word, ineffable, incorruptible, immeasurable, inconceivable. It, the Word, is a hidden light, being unreproducible, an immeasurable light, the source of all. It is foundation that supports every movement of the eons that belong to the mighty glory. It is the founding of every foundation. It is the breath of the powers. It is the eye of the three permanences, which exist as a voice by virtue of a thought, and it is a word by virtue of the sound. I, the Word, became a foundation for the all. Sufism has expounded on the efficacy of listening to the inner sound current as a way to control the wayward mind. Several Islamic mystics, including Rumi, have spoken at length about hearing heavenly sounds while in deep contemplation. The most accessible and detailed account in the 20th century was articulated by Hazrat Inayat Khan in his now justly famous and widely quoted book, The Mysticism of Sound. Abstract sound is called Sauti Sarmad by the Sufis. All space is filled with it. The vibrations of this sound are too fine to be either audible or visible to the material ears or eyes, since it is even difficult for the eyes to see the form and color of the ethereal vibrations on the external plane. It was the Sauti Sarmad, the sound of the abstract plane, which Muhammad heard in the cave of Gari Hira when he became lost in his divine ideal. The Quran refers to this sound in the words, "Be, and all became." Moses heard this very sound on Mount Sinai, when in communion with God, and the same word was audible to Christ when absorbed in his heavenly Father in the wilderness. Shiva heard the same Anahad Nada during his Samadhi in the cave of the Himalayas. The flute of Krishna is symbolic of the same sound. This sound is the source of all revelation to the masters, to whom it is revealed from within. It is because of this that they know and teach one and the same truth. The Sufi knows of the past, present, and future, and about all things in life, by being able to know the direction of sound. Every aspect of one's being in which sound manifests has a peculiar effect upon life, for the activity of vibrations has a special effect in every direction. The knower of the mystery of sound knows the mystery of the whole universe. Whoever has followed the strains of this sound has forgotten all earthly distinctions and differences, and has reached that goal of truth in which all the blessed ones of God unite. Space is within the body as well as around it. In other words, the body is in the space, and the space is in the body. It is an intriguing historical question to ponder on how meditating on subtler and subtler sounds first became known and advocated among spiritual adepts. Arguably, the practice may have arisen in our prehistoric past, since any form of deep concentration, by whatever means or by happenstance, tends to make one more keenly aware and cognizant of hidden features within one's own consciousness and neurophysiology. As a historian of Shabd yoga-related practices, it is too often overlooked that one of the great personages of the 17th century expounded in detail about listening to the inner sound and made the hidden practice more widely known. It is sociologically important to note that 2 centuries later, this same meditational technique would form the rudimentary basis of a new religious movement in the same city where the magnificent Taj Mahal was built, and where Dara Shikoh's father was tragically imprisoned by his younger son, Aurangzeb. That movement, founded by Shiv Dayal Singh, 1818 to 1878, living on an obscure street named Pani Gali in Agra, would eventually become known as the Radha Swamis. From this tradition sprouted many new religious movements across the globe, including Sawan Kirpal Mission, Ekankar, MSIA, Masterpath, Divine Light Mission, Kuan Yin, and many more. Each of these groups make the practice of listening to the inner sound a foundation of their respective teachings. It makes one wonder whether Shabd or Nada Yoga in the guise of Sultan ul Azkar, as taught by Sufi masters such as Sarmad, Mian Mir, Mullah Shah, and Guru Har Rai, key mentors in Dara Shikoh's life, was responsible, at least in part, for a certain kind of mystic zeitgeist in Agra, which made listening to the inner sound a more attractive and viable option to those searching for a beneficial spiritual practice. One thing is certain, however: Prince Dara Shikoh's life, though cut brutally short, his brother had his decapitated head sent to their father in a box, while he was imprisoned in the large Agra fort, continues to have a significant influence through his numerous writings, which touch at the very core of spirituality, and which give hope to all those seeking for a deeper meaning to life, and who are reaching out for better ways to probe the innermost reaches of their own consciousness and being. Perhaps one of the best windows into Dara Shikoh's spiritual outlook can be viewed through the lens of those mystics he most admired and with whom he learned the most about the inward quest. To accomplish this aim, each chapter focuses on 5 such mystics and what impact they had on him. Our goal is to get a richer understanding of what Dara Shikoh himself found most important in trying to unravel the great mystery of religion and its transcendent aims.